For the past few years, I've been working 2 jobs, typically leaving my house around 6 in the morning and not getting home until 10 at night. Then I sleep, and most days I repeat that same schedule. Unfortunately, that's just the situation I've been in for a while. But a couple of months ago, my routine changed because something happened. I came home one night, took a shower, and got ready for bed. But while I was in the shower, I heard movement just outside the bathroom door. I quickly got out and checked, but nothing was there. So I figured it just had to be a house creaking or something. I finished cleaning up and got into bed. All throughout the night, I kept hearing odd noises coming from all throughout the house. Mostly just some sort of creaking, kind of like it was really windy outside and making the house sway, but there was no wind and no reason for the house to be making any noise. At one point in the middle of the night, I even got up and walked around to try to find out what it was, but I found nothing. In the morning, I was very tired and had to work the whole day, relying on coffee to keep me awake. By the time I got home, I was exhausted and sleepy, really hoping for a good night's sleep. I went right upstairs and turned the shower on. But before I even got in, I heard something outside the bathroom door again. This time I was sure it was right outside the door, and it sounded like it passed right by and left the bedroom. Although as unlikely as it was, it really sounded like something had moved across my room. I knew I had to look to see if someone was there, but I was feeling really uneasy. When I did finally get the courage to look, I didn't see anything. I walked through the whole house and did a quick look around each room, but I was convinced it had to be something odd going on inside the walls or under the floorboards. I showered and got in bed, falling asleep just before midnight. The instant I woke up, I knew something was wrong. It was very dark, so it was still well into the night, and the entire house was silent. I wasn't sure what had woken me up, but I could feel that it had something to do with the sounds I'd been hearing. I peered over at the door and saw the slightest movement of a shadow from under the crack. I jolted up and stared across the room. My heart immediately started racing as I saw the shadow move away from the door and heard steps walking down the hallway stairs. I was horrified and frozen in fear, but it must have been the surge of adrenaline that got me out of my bed and made me swing open the door. I looked out, and standing at the end of the hallway was the dark outline of a man. His eyes were the only thing that really stood out to me. They pierced through me with a sense of anger and restlessness. I slammed my bedroom door shut and locked it. The man's footsteps got louder, and I started hearing loud thuds outside the room. Then, suddenly, everything went quiet. I called the police to come investigate, but they didn't have much luck. They found no sign of intrusion or any damage to the property. But I was damn sure that I saw a man and the rage in his eyes. Maybe it was a ghost of some man. Everything's just speculation at this point, but knowing that there is some random existence in my house is a horrifying thing to think about alone. I couldn't shake this feeling, and I had to move out before getting absolutely crazy about it. After living in the same house for 3 years, my family needed a change of scenery. Especially after the new addition to our family, our newborn child. We were so happy, so I started our search for a good and old house to start this new chapter of life. And I found one. So soon we packed up and moved into this old schoolhouse that had been standing ever since World War I, as told by the realtor. I've always wanted that vintage charm that reminds me of the good old days, and I was certain that I'd found everything like that in this new house. As I walked in, my eyes lit up. The walls were plastered with patterns that made me feel like I had stepped straight into a vintage and antique castle. The beams on the ceiling must have seen more history than a museum. I was like a kid in a candy store, just so excited and elated looking at the inside of this house. But I was not aware of the fact that this old world charm would become a nightmare of spine-chilling horror. As I was moving throughout the corridors of the house, I got a spooky kind of vibe. But the realtor kept on talking about the charm of the house, so I was distracted from my own creepy feeling. Even when I asked about the previous owners, he gave me a mixed response, which I quickly ignored as well. So stupid of me. The next day, our furniture arrived in front of the house, and my family was ready to unpack some new memories. We were all excited, my 2 kids bickering about who gets the bigger room, and my wife with our newborn in her arms, standing in front of the house with a bright smile on her face. I was so happy. But things started to escalate as time passed. I caught a whiff of something nasty. And I'm not talking about some bad food. This smell was like a bad odor, like a rotten meat or dead animal rising straight out of the basement. The basement was the only place I didn't see before moving in. And that turned out to be the real pain for me. As I opened the door of the basement, I couldn't control myself from the smell that breezed out of the basement. After covering up my face with a cloth and a flashlight in my hand, I went down to see what it was. The unsettling odor was surging at me and was impossible to ignore, but I knew that I had to confront that unsettling smell that had tainted the air of this house. However, what I saw was not something I expected. There were burned out candles, a knife, and mysterious pages on the floor. But this was not all, since I knew that wasn't what would cause such a foul smell. And my keen eyes fell on a blood stain on the floor. It was evident that something cruel took place in the basement, and recently. It was as though the basement had become a stage for a heinous crime. I found a shovel, and I began to dig in the rough area of the floor. As I was digging, my shovel hit something that felt fleshy. I got cautious, and when I went deeper, I saw a horrific sight before me. There was a dead deer, covered with blood, buried deep into the basement. The absurdity of the situation took over me, and it sent a shiver down my spine. Then, suddenly, I fainted at the sickening sight of the brutally dead deer. My wife came down to the basement, found me, and was able to wake me up. She then called the police and an ambulance. She couldn't ignore that sinister presence that lingered in our basement and suspected that it might be an unleashed force of black magic. As for me, I thought it was just a cover-up for a crime and the police would investigate it and that we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. But what happened a few days later made me regret my decision to ever move into that house. As night fell, once again we were attacked by some dark presence. We were sleeping, the kids in their room and our little baby in his room with the baby monitor just next to my wife in our room. She was suddenly startled by hearing someone talking. She got up and she noticed that it was coming from the baby monitor. It sounded like someone was growling through the baby monitor. My wife ran towards the baby's room while I was still sound asleep. She went in and she saw a shadowy figure cloaked in black, lifting our innocent infant from the crib. My wife's voice pierced the silence as she screamed for me. She cried and screamed, and then the shadowy figure in black vanished into thin air, dropping our child into his crib. It was like the presence wanted us to acknowledge that it's his place, not ours. I couldn't risk my family's life anymore, so the very next morning we packed up our belongings again. We abandoned that cursed house within a week and left its walls to guard the mysteries that remained unsolved. No one could possibly live there. It was rumored in the neighborhood that at night you could hear chants drifting from the schoolhouse. Beware, for the secrets of the basement can never remain hidden forever. You never truly know what lurks beneath the surface of your own house. So, the time came when we moved into a house that the town claimed was haunted. But we didn't really believe in any of that spooky stuff. Anyway, one day my parents had to go out of town for work, leaving me alone in our new house. It was a stormy night with lightning flashing and thunder booming outside. The wind howled like an angry monster, rattling the windows and making the whole house shake. I tried to stay calm, thinking I could handle being alone for a while. But as the night went on, weird things started to happen. I heard creaking sounds and whispers that sent shivers down my spine. The TV turned on by itself, and the channels started changing on their own. I thought it was just a glitch at first, but then I saw a shadowy figure moving in the corner of my eye. My heart pounded like crazy, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. This is just my imagination playing tricks on me, I tried to convince myself, but deep down I knew something was off. As I sat on the couch trying to distract myself, the lights flickered, and the room turned dark for a split second. What the heck? I muttered, feeling my heart race even faster. I grabbed my phone to use the flashlight and saw strange symbols written on the walls in glowing red letters. Fear consumed me, and I decided to go to my room and lock the door. But as I stood up, I heard a chilling voice calling out my name from the hallway. It whispered, sending chills down my spine. I rushed to my room and slammed the door shut, hoping to keep whatever it was out. But the door started rattling, and I could hear scratching sounds coming from the other side. "Please, just go away!" I cried, feeling tears filling up my eyes. The room felt icy cold, and my breath turned into fog as I exhaled. I sat huddled in a corner, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Outside the window, I saw a pale face staring at me with empty eyes. "No way! No way!" I muttered, trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination. But then, the face disappeared and the room fell silent. I thought it was finally over. But then, the silence was broken by heavy footsteps approaching the door of my room. My heart pounded, and I felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. The doorknob started turning, and the door slowly creaked open. I held my breath. My mind was racing with fear. And then, a dark figure stepped into my room with its eyes glowing with an eerie light. I couldn't move, and I couldn't scream as the figure moved closer and closer. It reached out a cold, bony hand towards me, and I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. But then, out of nowhere, I heard a loud thud, which seemed to be my parents coming home. I opened my eyes. A bright light filled the room, and the figure disappeared. What I saw after opening my eyes were my parents standing there, looking worried. "We came back early. Are you all right? We heard you screaming, and we saw someone standing in front of you from the window. Who was here?" my father asked with concern evident in his voice. I couldn't answer, so I just hugged them tightly, grateful for their arrival. Then I told them everything that had happened, and we decided to leave the house right away. As we walked out, I glanced back at the house, feeling a chill run down my spine. From that day on, I never went back to that possessed house. I learned that sometimes things you don't believe in can turn out to be very real, and it's better to trust your instincts and stay away from spooky places. That creepy house remained empty as a reminder of the terrifying night I spent home alone, and a warning to anyone who dared to enter its haunted halls.